Well, I'm home for the summer, and it's a big surprise, I know. But I was actually going to be home around the same time that like quarantine and the state shutdown happened, so I didn't actually get like the online college experience. And I'm thankful for that because like my friends have informed me it's just an uncoordinated catastrophe. But instead, because I dodged that bullet, I have like all the time in the world. I have a 5-ish, 6-ish month for a summer break between the school year. And it sounds really exciting, and to me it absolutely was. I mean, I could take all the time I wanted on like every hobby and interest and dive into like topics and ideas I wanted to do, or even spend time just being creative and just like going into ideas that I want to work on. But I quickly discovered that while a lot of free time is exciting in concept, the actual application of it is exhausting. I'm finding that I don't even get out of bed until lunch because that's the only thing I have that's even loosely planned. And that's the only thing that is like an external motivator for me. The result is that I'm spending a rather upsetting amount of time marathoning TV shows, especially with my mom. And lately, rather a little while ago, when I wrote this, we were watching 30 Rock, and which, if you've never seen it, is sort of a show within a show kind of thing, where I think it's loosely based on Tina Fey's time working as a writer for SNL, somewhere like 1997, 2006-ish. I don't remember exactly the dates, but when she left SNL and she went off to write and star in 30 Rock, which is her own like creation. It's an incredible show, and I would absolutely recommend it to anybody who's looking for something to fill the empty pit in their brain during this just ridiculous time. It's on Hulu, but I think you can also find it at a bunch of the like other places, even on YouTube now, because I guess YouTube is a TV service if you pay for it, I guess. Anyways, back on topic. I was watching it last night, or, when I wrote this last night, and it was season 6, episode 16 for the like specific detail. And there was a sort of like throwaway joke that stuck in my head. Basically, it was a character named Pete, and the joke was that he couldn't shave his head because he actually had a birthmark that looked like a swastika on the back of his head. And it was, it's a lame joke, and I laughed and shrugged it off. But then as the episode ended, I went to go bed down for the night, and it like kept coming back to me, and it wouldn't leave. It was like something about it stuck in my brain and just kept like sort of bouncing around until I had to sit down, and I wrote this out and all these kind of ideas. Now it's midnight when I'm writing this, and I don't know whether this is interesting or even cognizant, but I want to talk about like the idea of the guy having a terrible, awful birthmark on the back of his head. And like what would happen if a baby was born with a swastika on their head? Of course, to start out, there's two schools of thought, two little argumentative stances you can throw your punches from. And on one hand, the swastika is obviously a terrible symbol of hatred, genocide, and prejudice. So it naturally follows that the child should have it removed because, the child is born innocent, and that marking could hurt the child in the future, as people who see it may not be able to help but associate the child with the feelings of hatred and genocide and prejudice. In the same way that if we see a swastika accidentally made in our own world, we try to remove it or obfuscate it in some way, because we can't help but associate it with one of, the darkest parts of humanity's past. On the other hand, one could say that if we remove the child's birthmark, a cosmetic surgery to change his appearance, it is thus implicitly saying that the child, an innocent new life, is already defined by our world, our cultures and mistakes, and our hatred and prejudice before it was even born. And what does that say about us? That we must change what makes us uncomfortable, irregardless of context or intent? Is that mankind's great prerogative to change what we don't like and remake the world into whatever makes us the most comfortable? This is getting a little heavy, but just to make sure it wasn't something that might cause people grief in the real world and outside of my little brain outlet, I did some research. And of course, by research, I mean I typed in baby swastika birthmark into my search bar and pressed enter. And as far as I know, there are no records of babies that have been born with that sort of birthmark. The only really applicable results I got were an old short film entitled A Kitten for Hitler, which is a really messed up film in which Hitler is gifted a kitten which has a swastika on his stomach. But I think the fact that it's a cat rather than the person makes it an entire other argument altogether. The second search result that I was talking about is the exact same point I had been thinking of, except in the context of how the symbol of the swastika is outlawed in Germany. And it was also on a Guitar, Chords, and Tabs website forum. So not exactly the sort of political philosophy discussion forum that you'd hope for this specific idea, which is sort of shown in the responses. But back on topic. This conundrum kind of threw me for a loop for a while. I feel as if there are some of those moral choices and ideas that you lose no matter what you choose, and there really isn't an honest way that you can say one side is right or wrong. So I've thought of instead was to abstract it a little bit. A baby is a little bit harsh, so maybe we could take the idea of the newborn innocence and sort of do away with it to see what we get. What comes to mind is the Reclaim the Swastika movement that was going on a couple years back, where people were selling swastika on clothing, hoping to reclaim the original ideas it represented, which was where in many cultures in Eastern Europe to Asia, it was known as a religious and spiritual symbol. The concept was to reclaim it and present it as it was originally intended, without the hatred, racism, or xenophobia. It was an interesting concept, and I think that logically it's in the same line as the idea that we shouldn't remove the baby's birthmark, as it was not a symbol of hate, and it doesn't have to be now. But it was an interesting concept. Not to completely editorialize, but I think it was a dumb move. Within our own cultural context right now, and the fact that the symbol still has lasting repercussions and use and hate to this day, I think it's ridiculous to even try to connect it in the public eye to something other than one of the greatest evils that humanity has ever known. Not to say that we should censor it in religious ceremonies, but to try to profit off of it and send it out into the world without context almost feels like it's trivializing the symbol's history. So in that context, I'm affirmably against it. When I take that logic and I try to bring it back to the baby and that, hypothetical, it doesn't click in my brain. And there's something else there. The fact that it's a child that we're talking about, and that the child will someday grow up to be a full somebody with rights and ideas and their own opinions on what to do with their own body is a far different concept to me than just someone wearing a symbol of hate because they thought it would look good on a sweater. I don't know. I've been stuck between wanting to protect this hypothetical baby and this brain baby, if you will, from the anger that the world holds for the symbol, and therefore the child that is stuck onto, and trying my best to not let the hatred of the world define and change this child before it can even open its eyes and see the world around it. I think that's something that's going to stick in my brain for a while and rattle around in there until something breaks loose. I'm sorry I don't have a really concrete answer to this one. It was just a little brain tickler I thought I would throw out there in a stimulus-less time. I do remember hearing about a baby that was named Adolf Hitler by its parents and was taken away and renamed. But just like the cat thing, I think that's a different concept because the hatred was forced onto him by his parents rather than just by random chance. Anyway, thanks for listening to me talk about a series of loosely related concepts I drew together at 1 a.m. Best wishes to everybody right now, and stay healthy. Adios.